Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series, Essays on the Gita, with our beloved Ranga. Today we begin a new chapter, Chapter 3, The Human Disciple.
The Human Disciple. The previous chapter was the avatar. The avatar who was, and he has discussed the divine teacher, and there's a divine element in him and there's a human element in him. So he has discussed the avatar, now he is discussing the human disciple. Such then is the divine teacher of the Gita, the eternal avatar, the divine who has descended into the human consciousness, the Lord seated within the heart of all beings, He who guides from behind the veil all our thought and action and heart seeking, even as He directs from behind the veil of visible and sensible forms and forces and tendencies, the great universal action of the world which He has manifested in His own being. All the strife of our upward endeavor and seeking finds its culmination and ceases in a satisfied fulfillment when we can rend the veil and get behind the apparent self to this real self, can realize our whole being in this true Lord of our being, can give up our personality to and into this one real person, merge our ever dispersed and ever converging mental activities into His plenary light, offer up our errant and struggling will and energies into His vast, luminous and undivided will, at once renounce and satisfy all our dissipated, outward-moving desires and emotions in the plenitude of His self-existent bliss. This is the world teacher of whom eternal knowledge, all other highest teaching, is but the various reflection and partial word. This, the voice to which the hearing of our soul has to awaken. So, very beautiful. And very quickly, some things can be pointed out. We will just see that. Such then is the divine teacher of the Gita, the eternal avatar. Note the word eternal. So it's not necessarily the human avatar, but the eternal avatar is the one divine who comes down into the physical world, enters into every form, every creature, every human being. He is the Lord seated within the heart of all beings. All beings, not only humans. He who guides from behind the veil all our thought and action and heart's seeking. So, thought in the mind, action, the body, the heart seeking, the vital. So all this, He is behind all these things and He is guiding the action of thought, the action of the emotions, and also the physical actions. He is guiding everything. Heart seeking, even as He directs from behind the veil of visible and sensible forms. In the human being, the visible and sensible form is the body. And other things also, in animals and even in inanimate things, the form, behind the form, He is there. Forms and forces and tendencies. Now look at that. The sensible forms, physical, and forces, subtler, and tendencies, even psychological movements. Okay? The great universal action of the world, which He has manifested in His own being. So, in other words, there is nothing else but He. The whole universe is only in His own being. So, we have to note that. When He is creating something, He is not creating something outside Himself. He is creating it within Himself. So,
Well, now I have a question.
yeah.
And it's a question that many people might ask. If He is guiding, we know He's seated within the heart of all beings. But if He is guiding everything, then what about those who don't open to that guidance?
All of us don't open in the beginning.
Exactly.
All of us, because there are veils. And this is the game that He is playing with Himself. He is hiding Himself in the opposite of Himself and is escaping. This is where you have to understand the theory of the Leela, the play. That's why Sri Aurobindo used the word play very often. It's a play. It's something that we can't understand at the mental level, because what sort of play is this where there is so much of suffering, so much of destruction? So you have to understand that the question is shifted to another level. So you have to answer that. But the answer to this is, the veil is our body, our vital and our mind. Universally, the veil is the matter. Veil is the matter, veil is the life, and veil is the mind. So in all this, He hides Himself and He is coming out of it. I like to use the image of that magician, the famous magician. I forget his name.
Houdini.
Yeah, Houdini, that's right. So he handcuffs himself, blindfolds himself, puts himself into a trunk, and the trunk is locked from outside and it is thrown into the sea. And from there he comes out. So this is what the divine is doing and enjoying what he's doing. So it's a game. These are the conditions that he's doing that. So we have to accept the veils are there, and he is guiding each one according to the nature of the person. So if your veil has become thin, you will get the guidance more. If the veils are thick, you will get the guidance less, but the guidance is always there. It's like a steady guidance, but if you open your door, the guidance will come in, you will hear. But if you don't open your doors, how will it come in? The divine never forces doors open. He waits for you to open it, then he will come in. And your opening the door is the evolution, the individual evolution, and there is also a universal evolution. The universal evolution is in the universe. From matter comes out life, and from life comes out mind. But there is also an individual evolution. And individual evolution keeps pace with the universal evolution. Oh. But the individual evolution does not keep pace with the universal evolution after mind. The individual can now go shoot beyond nature. And it becomes conscious evolution. Before that, it is unconscious evolution, mechanical. That's why it takes 1 million years for life to come out of matter.
So the universal evolution is always slower.
Yeah, very slow and very mechanical, and it's only a play of forces. The gravitational force pulling you down and the other force pulling you up. Or you can use the words tamasic force pushing you down and the rajasic force pulling you up. So this takes a long time. And the divine is in no hurry at all, because he stands outside time and space. So for us, time is important, but for him, time is not important. So it's a very slow process. But once man comes into the picture, he himself, being part of nature, his individual evolution has an effect in the universal evolution. And that's what Sri Aurobindo is now. He is asking the evolution to go to the next step, in which man has participated. Not mechanically, but consciously.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the answer. Okay, so he is manifesting the universe in his own being. All the strife of our upward endeavor and seeking finds its culmination and ceases in a satisfied fulfillment when we can rend the veil and get behind our apparent self to this real self, can realize our whole being in this true Lord of our being, can give up our personality to and into this one real person, merge our ever dispersed and ever converging mental activities into His plenary light, offer up our errant and struggling will and energies into His vast, luminous, undivided will, at once renounce and satisfy all our dissipated, outward moving desires and emotions in the plenitude of His self-existent bliss. So, very interesting words. We'll look at each one carefully. All our strife and upward endeavor. All human endeavor is upward. It may be very, very slow. You may not even feel that there is an endeavor, but it is there always. A very slow movement up. Seeking. We also are seeking for something better, some progress. Physical progress, vital progress, mental progress. There is a constant seeking also. Seeking is best illustrated in the physical world by science. Science is constantly seeking new powers and secret laws it is trying to seek and finding. Never finding ultimately, but going towards that. Okay, so seeking. And finds its culmination. When does this seeking and endeavor end? In a satisfied fulfillment, when we can rend the veil and get behind our apparent self. So, what is this veil he is talking about? That's exactly what we discussed. And get behind the apparent self to this real self. The apparent self is your body, vital and mind. Apparently, we think that this is what I am. But the real self is your soul, your psychic being, the divine presence which manifests itself through the psychic being. The way it is written here, the divine presence is more than the psychic being, because the psychic being is sometimes sleeping. There is no psychic being in a stone or in a caterpillar. But the divine presence is there, but there is no soul. It is not yet developed. So the divine presence is different from the psychic being.
And Mother does say that in the animals there's the beginning of a psychic
That's right.
being. So as we evolve further and further...
It evolves more and more, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And in the man who is fully awakened spiritually, this soul, the psychic being, can merge with the self. The psychic being is always individual. But the self is not individual. It is impersonal and infinite. The psychic being is individual and limited to that extent. But if it joins with the self, it can become infinite also. It can join. It doesn't always necessarily join. One who is a devotee of the divine, he may be very well satisfied with only his psychic opening. He may be very content with his relation with the divine. He may not want knowledge. He may not want to go up into the infinite. The intimacy with the divine, the limited relation is enough for him. So the psychic being has a choice. It can merge with the Supreme or it need not.
But
And
if it's fully realized...
so what do you mean by realization? All these are realizations.
If the psychic being is fully realized,
Yes.
has it already
Yes.
merged with the
Yes.
divine?
Not necessarily. That's the whole point, no?
Okay.
So, in fact, we have different realizations. We have the psychic being's realization is what he calls the psychic being's devotion is called Samipya Mukti, intimacy with the divine. That's also a realization. So Samipya Mukti, Sadharma Mukti, Sayujya Mukti. You get the integration. You are integrated with the divine. So all these are realizations of different aspects of the divine. Srivamdeva wants you to have an integral realization. Knowledge as well as emotion as well as physical. Everything must be there. You must realize the divine in all the three ways. So, realization. So, the real person, note the interesting way he puts person with a P cap. That's either the soul or the psychic being in you, and personality with a lowercase represents the body, vital and mind, the apparent self. So whenever you use the word personality, you must know that he is speaking of the outer nature, the body, mind, life. And P cap, person, that's the eternal, infinite being within you, your soul. Okay? So this is a style which he adopts. So you must know that. When he says personality with a lowercase p, body, mind, life. P cap, person, the real soul in you. Okay. And when does this veil get broken? He's saying rend the veil. Now that's interesting because it reminds you of Sri Aurobido's message to Satyendra on his birthday. Mm-hmm. What is it that divides us from the divine? What are the veils? So he says, a veil behind the heart, a lid over the mind, divide us from the divine. Two ways it divides you from the divine. A veil behind the heart, a lid over the mind.
Love and devotion.
Love and devotion rend the veil. In the silence of the mind, the lid thins and vanishes.
Beautiful.
So these are the two, the problem and the solution. So how does that veil burst? In three ways. From the knowledge point of view, from the emotional point of view, and from the action point of view. That's what he's describing here. We'll look at that. So, can give up our personality to and into this one real person. Merge our ever dispersed and ever converging mental activities into his plenary light. So our thoughts which are dispersed, constantly moving about, unstable, they have to be replaced by plenary light.
And ever converging.
Yeah, that is something ever dispersed and ever converging. Ever dispersed, lack of concentration. Ever converging, whenever you are concentrating, you are converging. When we are concentrating on this, there is a convergence, there is a thickening, there is a summarizing, there is a shortening, and densification if you want. Inward movement and outward movement. Okay, so in his plenary light, offer up, so that's the knowledge part, the mind part. Then the vital part. Offer up our errant and struggling will and energies into his vast, luminous, undivided will. In our own case, our will is divided. Sometimes we don't even know whether we should do something or not. We have a will to do something, but all sorts of objections come up. So it's a divided will. Not only that, I want the divine, but I also want to enjoy life. Divided will. So it has to be an undivided will. That's what is meaning. Okay, so ever converging mental activities into plenary light. Offer up our errant. The word errant, that which is erring, going here and there, not remaining on the straight path, going here and there. Vagabonding if you want. Okay. So, and struggling will and into his vast, luminous and undivided will. At once renounce and satisfy all our dissipated, outward moving desires. Now that's interesting. First of all, dissipation and outward moving desires. Our desires are mostly directed outwards into the physical world. I'm going in the marketplace, I see beautiful clothes, I want them. I see a TV set, I want it. I want everything. It's going outwards. That's why he's saying outward moving desires. The inward moving desire would probably be your aspiration.
Yes.
The inward moving desire. So, but there is a very interesting phrase here, renounce and satisfy. The real satisfaction can come by renouncing. So the very first shloka of the Isha Upanishad. Enjoy by renouncing. Okay? He says, enjoy, but by renouncing. Renounce the desires and enjoy everything. So, this renounce and enjoy is very clearly part of that. Okay? So, te tat tyaktena bhunjita. Tyaktena, give up the desire and enjoy. Yeah, that's right. Tyaktena bhunjita. That's right. So, renounce and dissatisfy. This sounds almost contradictory. But you have to renounce the desires and enjoy the right things. That which you are enjoying now with attachment and with desire and slavery, enjoy later on the same thing, but without slavery and without attachment. In other words, if it is given to you, you are happy. If it is not given to you, you are still happy. So, renounce and satisfy all our dissipated outward moving desires and emotions in the plenitude of His self-existent bliss. Replace pleasure by bliss. This is a world teacher of whose eternal knowledge all other highest teaching is but the various reflection and partial word. This, the voice to which the hearing of our soul has to awaken. The hearing of the soul has to awaken. So the guidance which is coming, sometimes it comes through words, sometimes it comes through thoughts. Okay? For Sri Aurobindo, very clearly he heard the voice, go to Pondicherry.
So, do you feel, in general, that those who have come to the ashram and Oroville have been called in some way?
Yes. There is nothing like chance.
Exactly.
There is nothing like accident.
Exactly.
Their souls have traveled many, 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 many miles, and when it is time, they are automatically called here. I was seeing that there are some reports of from Oroville of those who have suddenly come to know about Mother and Sri Aurobindo in where? In far distant corners of the world, South America, here, there, Russia. Okay? So, they get suddenly, they come to know Sri Aurobindo and they are attracted and they come to Pondicherry. Okay? So, this one very interesting case is Maggie Lidchi. Okay? She was well known to Mother when she was a young girl, but she died when she was 18. In the earlier life. She was only 18 years old when she died, and she was very close to Mother. This soul of this 18-year-old girl traveled all over the world before she came to Pondicherry. And when she came to Pondicherry and met Mother, Mother realized that this is the soul of the girl I knew when she was 18 in Paris. So here is a very clear case of guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that about Maggie?
That part I didn't know.
Eh?
I knew it about Annie. Did you hear the story of Annie?
No.
My first wife.
Yes.
When we came to meet Mother on her birthday, Mother looked at her and she said, "This is not the first time we have met. You have been with me many times before. Many, many times." It was
So clearly.
so clear to me, gosh.
So these are all guidance, yes. In fact, when we were children, Mother has told us very clearly. She told us very clearly that do you think that you are here by chance? No. You have been called. You have been promised that on the crucial, when the time comes, when the crucial time will come in the physical world, you will be called. You have been promised. She says that very clearly. So there is no such thing as chance. Everything is guided. That's a divine guidance from within. So, the hearing of our soul has to awaken. You go to the next para. We go into a little detail because very interesting. For instance, this renounce and satisfy. There's an echo in the Isha Upanishad. No? So that's why. And personality and person. So these are little details which help to understand the thing. I'm reading the next para. Arjuna, the disciple who receives his initiation on the battlefield, is a counterpart of this conception. We'll discuss it later. He is the type of the struggling human soul who has not yet received the knowledge but has grown fit to receive it by action in the world, in a close companionship and an increasing nearness to the higher and divine self in humanity. There is a method of explaining the Gita in which not only this episode but the whole Mahabharata is turned into an allegory of the inner life and has nothing to do with our outward human life and action, but only with the battles of the soul and powers that strive within us for possession. That is a view which the general character and the actual language of the epic do not justify, if pressed, would turn the straightforward philosophical language of the Gita into a constant, laborious, and somewhat puerile mystification. The language of the Veda, and part at least of the Puranas, is plainly symbolic, full of figures and concrete representations of things that lie behind the veil. But the Gita is written in plain terms and professes to solve the great ethical and spiritual difficulties which the life of man raises. And it will not do to go behind this plain language and thought and rest them to the service of our fancy. But there is this much of truth in the view that the setting of the doctrine, though not symbolical, is certainly typical, as indeed the setting of such a discourse as the Gita must necessarily be, if it is to have any relation at all with that which it frames. Arjuna, as we have seen, is a representative man of a great world struggle and divinely guided movement of men and nations. In the Gita, he typifies the human soul of action, brought face to face through that action in its highest and most violent crisis with the problem of human life and its apparent incompatibility with the spiritual state, or even with a purely ethical ideal of perfection. So Srimad is saying that we should not take the Gita as only a symbolic story. Like that's the mistake also that in the Quran, they speak of jihad. So some people say, oh, jihad doesn't mean the physical jihad, but the fight within, the spiritual fight between the good and the evil. But they are interpreting it as though even in the physical world, you have to kill all the anti-divine forces. Okay? So here, some are interpreting the Gita as symbolic only and not of spiritual value in the physical world. So I'm saying no. The language is very, very clear because the Gita tells you even how to sit, how to meditate, okay? How to reject desires, how to give gifts, how to receive. It's great detail, practical details are there. So you can't say that the Gita is only symbolic. That's what he's pointing out. Although there is a symbol, because Arjuna represents the human soul and they are traveling together in the car with the divine soul. The chariot is the body-mind life and the divine is there in it and the human soul also is there in it. And they're traveling together. So it is symbolic in a sense, but it's not only symbol. That's what is warning you. So, Arjuna, the disciple who receives his initiation on the battlefield, is a counterpart of this conception. Which is the conception? That you have to, the human being is being guided by the divine and it has to reach its culmination, the perfected human man. But Arjuna is not yet the perfected human man, but he is a candidate for it. He is a fit instrument for the teaching that the Gita is giving. Okay? There are many human beings who are not fit for the teaching. That's why in our Indian scriptures we have the word adhikara. You must have the authorization to receive the teaching. Because if you are not yet mature enough, the teaching being given to you will fall flat on you. I am not fit for rocket science. So, those who are ready for the spiritual teaching, they will benefit. So, you must have the adhikara. Everybody can't start a spiritual life. You have to have sufficient maturity so that you can start the spiritual life. So, that's what he's saying, that he is the counterpart of this conception. He is ready for the spiritual teaching. Okay? So, he is the type of the struggling human soul who has not yet received the knowledge, but has grown fit to receive it by action in a world, in a close companionship and an increasing nearness to the higher and divine self in humanity. The higher and divine self in humanity is Krishna here, Sri Krishna. And he is a companion. He is a close companion, very near to him. They are constantly, they are talking together, they are socializing, they are even having dinner together. That comes out afterwards when in the Gita it says that I may have behaved with you in the wrong way. When he sees the divinity of Krishna, he says, then excuse me because I took you for an ordinary human being. And I may have said certain words which were not appropriate when we were sitting and conversing or when we were having dinner together. So that's the thing. Okay, so close companionship, very clearly Arjuna and Krishna's friendship. And increasing nearness to the higher and divine self in humanity. Higher and divine self in humanity, the avatar, Sri Krishna. There is a method of explaining the Gita in which not only this episode, but the whole Mahabharata is turned into an allegory of the inner life and has nothing to do with our outward human life and action, but only with the battles of the soul and the powers that strive within us for possession. That is a view which the general character and the actual language of the epic does not justify, and if pressed, would turn the straightforward philosophical language of the Gita into a constant, laborious and somewhat puerile mystification. Puerile, childish, something very immature. Okay,
so I'd like to go back to the previous sentence and ask you, in those early days when Sri Aurobindo would meet with his disciples, were they grown fit to receive him by his action? I think some were. Nolini must have been, Purani must have been fit to receive that.
Narad, I'm sorry, I didn't exactly get your point.
Well, you see, many left Sri Aurobindo during that time because they thought they were just interested in the freedom of India.
Yeah.
Not in yoga at all.
That's right.
But there must have been some who were fit to receive his knowledge.
Yes.
And I think these are the ones that we remember the most.
Yes.
But there may have been many others also.
Yes, it's possible.
Yeah.
Certainly possible.
Yes.
Those who were called are very clearly, physically also Sri Aurobindo has called many people. Purani was one of them.
Yes.
Purani was called. He said, forget about bombs, you come. So he came after 2 years. After winding up his affairs in Gujarat, he came. So Sri Aurobindo called him physically. There are 2 other cases also where Sri Aurobindo actually called them. There was Rajangam. Rajangam was a young student who finished his MBBS, his medical studies. And he was from a well-to-do family. So when his picture was sent to Sri Aurobindo said, yoke him. He used the word yoke him.
Wow.
Bring him to Pondicherry. So here he is being called. Okay. There is also another gentleman also who was asked to come. Kanai Ganguly. He used to be our French teacher. He was a Bengali man and he used to be our French teacher. Okay. So he was also called. So some have been physically called and some have not been physically called but came themselves spiritually called. Narad is a good example. He was a doctor and he was in Chittagong. Chattogram is the name, but now they call it Chittagong. It's in Bangladesh now. He was there. But somehow he got guided and he came here. And Sri Aurobindo says to me, he is not a doctor. He has come to serve me. Champaklal was a fantastic case. Champaklal is a young boy. He came and the first time he saw Sri Aurobindo, he just bowed down to him for half an hour at his feet. He was an unbelievable character.
Thank you.
So, take also the case of Amal Kiran. Okay? Amal Kiran came to know Sri Aurobindo when he bought a pair of new shoes.
Yeah, in the paper.
And it was wrapped in a newspaper. And he saw about the ashram and he got interested. Clearly called. Being called through a wrapping of a shoe. So, yeah. So we go to the next one.
Yes.
This is a view which the general character and the actual language of the epic do not justify, and if pressed, would turn the straightforward philosophical language of the Gita into a constant, laborious, and somewhat puerile mystification. In other words, it is detailed practical guidance for life in the world. It's not only symbolic. The language of the Veda and part at least of the Puranas is plainly symbolic. There is no detailed guidance in the Vedas about how to lead life in a spiritual life. They are symbolic, full of figures and concrete representations of things that lie behind the veil. But the Gita is written in plain terms and professes to solve the great ethical and spiritual difficulties which the life of man raises, and it will not do to go behind this plain language and thought and wrest them to the service of our fancy. But there is this much of truth in the view that the setting of the doctrine, though not symbolical, is certainly typical, as indeed the setting of such a discourse as the Gita must necessarily be, if it is to have any relation at all with that which it frames. So, it is symbolic in a certain sense, but it's not only symbolic. Arjuna, as we have seen, is the representative man of a great world struggle and divinely guided movement of men and nations. In the Gita, he typifies the human soul of action, brought face to face through that action in its highest and most violent crisis with the problem of human life and its apparent incompatibility with the spiritual state, or even with a purely ethical ideal of perfection. So it's interesting that the Second World War, and Sri Aurobindo's spiritual life going on together, and the Second World War would have put his effort to bring down the supermind, it would have got it postponed or even annulled. So that's why he had to fight. And that's exactly what Arjuna also had to do. He had to fight against the Kauravas and make sure that the forces of evil are defeated. So similar. Arjuna is the fighter in the chariot with the divine Krishna as his charioteer. In the Veda also, we have this image of the human soul and the divine riding in one chariot through a great battle to the goal of a high aspiring effort. But there it is a pure figure and symbol. The divine is there, Indra, master of the world of light and immortality, the power of divine knowledge which descends to the aid of the human seeker, battling with the sons of falsehood, darkness, limitation, mortality. The battle is with spiritual enemies who bar the way to the higher world of our being. And the goal is that plane of vast being, resplendent with the light of the supreme truth and uplifted to the conscious immortality of the perfected soul, of which Indra is the master. The human soul is Kutsa in the story of the Veda. He who constantly seeks the seer knowledge, as his name implies, and he is the son of Arjuna or Arjuni, the white one, maybe Arjuni, I don't know, child of Switra, the white mother. He is, that is to say, the sattvic or purified and light-filled soul which is open to the unbroken glories of the divine knowledge. And when the chariot reaches the end of his journey, the own home of Indra, the human Kutsa has grown into such an exact likeness of his divine companion that he can only be distinguished by Shachi, the wife of Indra, because she is truth conscious. The parable is evidently of the inner life of man, but it's a figure of the human growing into the likeness of the eternal divine by the increasing illumination of knowledge. But the Gita starts from action, and Arjuna is a man of action and not of knowledge, the fighter, never the seer or the thinker. So, we'll discuss this in detail next time.